Hey guys, welcome back to this episode of the Morse Code Podcast. Today on the pod, Ron Charles, the book editor of the Washington Post. Ron is my first guest who does not currently reside in St. Louis. However, as a St. Louis native who spent the first 35 years of his life here, I decided he counts. Long before Ron was one of the preeminent voices in literary criticism, even before he was colleagues with John Hamm, Ron was my college professor. You can imagine how nerve-wracking it was to write a paper who would one day become one of only full-time literary critics in the United States. You'll learn pretty quick that Ron is one of the most creative and enthusiastic voices. He is so fun. He has such a unique take. He has such a unique literature and writing. He loves so much. I had so much fun talking with him about the literary world. I had about so much publishing has been and where it's going. About his time in St. Louis as well as his time in Washington, D.C. About his time in St. Louis as well as his time. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It was a great conversation. If you get a time, I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you get a chance, check out Ron's Totally Hip book review on YouTube. It is something to behold. All right, enjoy. Ron Charles.
So, as I think you know, this is intended to be a St. Louis focused podcast, and you are my first non-St. Louis resident. But as a St. Louis native, I figure we can grandfather you in.
Thank you.
I
was there 35 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah. As you, I'm sure, experience, there's some days when you do the work for the work, and there's some days when you do the work for you. And this is one of those conversations I'm just doing for me, to be totally honest.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
But I think I'll circle back to St. Louis, but I'm interested. You grew up here in St. Louis. You now live in Washington, D.C. I imagine you are in a constant state of awe of the august statesman and the and the dedicated public servants who are taking on our planet's most pressing problems. You want to compare and contrast?
There are lots of people like that in Washington, I have to say. So I am often in awe of those people. They're not all like that, as your laughter suggests, but I do run into a lot of very dedicated public servants who have dedicated their lives to making sure that our water stays clean, that the drugs people use are safe, that people get taught that the streets are safe, that the borders are maintained, all those kind of people. They work without much glory and a lot of unneeded criticism. So yeah, there are people like that here.
Yeah. Is it true what I've heard that there's sort of the town takes on a flow? I don't know if cyclical is the right way to put it, but from administration to administration, it takes on a different identities. Do you see that?
Well, you definitely see it during the current administration, of course. D.C. is one of the most democratic cities in the country. I think maybe the most. So it's always that level of political orientation. But with different administrations do come and go, and you do see a shift. And the people at the top, of course, there's a lot of turnover, and they have their own restaurants and their own clubs and that sort of thing. All shifts around every 4 years. So yeah, you're right. There is a different vibe that comes in. It's pretty grim now, of course, with the streets full of military people and ICE, and everyone kind of very upset about what's being done.
Yeah.
And then, I know it's been 5 years, but it still seems like the pandemic is very close, and you can still see the effects everywhere. Lots of businesses still gone. The city much quieter than it was before the pandemic. It is a different place, even though it has come back from the worst of the pandemic.
You grew up, I identify with this a little bit. You and I both grew up in suburban St. Louis County, and you're, I believe, in a more urban environment now, right? I don't think you live in the city, but.
No, I live right on the edge, about 2 miles from the line. I live in Bethesda, which is a bedroom community right outside of DC. But I mean, I know what you're suggesting. I mean, I didn't even talk to a black person until I was in 8th grade. I mean, I cannot imagine the kind of segregation that I lived in St. Louis. It was, now I look back and kind of in horror of that sort of segregation. Here, when my kids were in school, they had classmates of all different backgrounds and races and people from around the world because of all the people that come to DC every year. It is a very mixed, rich, worldly place. That is really wonderful.
That's a great way into the St. Louis of it all, which is what's it been like for you? I don't know if you've gone through a similar process to myself in terms of growing up in a place, loving a place. I didn't necessarily come out of my St. Louis childhood with a full understanding of St. Louis and the context and what it meant for different, demographic groups and even religious groups and that kind of thing until much later, and until I had some distance from it. What's that been for you? You've written about having a love for St. Louis and a kind of sentimental concern for it. What's that process been like for you?
Very much the same as what you described. You really have to move away to look back and see what you had, what you didn't have, what you like. And of course, St. Louis has changed so much. Mm-hmm. I lived way out in the county, in Town and Country. That's a made up name. And, it could have been anywhere. It was a very sort of TV life. But I shouldn't say it could have been anywhere. It could only be in very specific places. But now my parents live in the Central West End. Oh. When I visit every year, a few times a year, that's a totally different vision of St. Louis. It's a much richer place that I see looking from the Central West End out than from the county, covering my eyes, afraid to go downtown. It was kind of ridiculous, the kind of segregation we lived in, the fear of the city way back then in the 60s and 70s. And now, when I come visit my parents a couple times a year, I can't believe how wonderful the city is, how beautiful it is, how great the park is, all the kind of wonderful restaurants you've got, the lovely museums. It's a really rich place. I was just talking to a friend of mine, another editor here in the paper, who was out looking at Wash U for her son this weekend, and she said, "My gosh, why did you ever leave?" It looks like such a lovely place and such an easy place to live. I think what she means by that is just the pace, the tone of that everyone has, the kind of life economically you can have in a place like St. Louis. It is quite different than DC.
Do you think you'd ever get back permanently?
I would not be surprised, but it would be hard to live. I mean, now I've lived in Boston and I've lived in DC. I also am in love with big cities, and all that they have to offer. So I don't know. I would not move back to the suburbs. I know that. I haven't driven. I can drive, but I haven't owned a car for years.
Oh, wow.
I stopped in Boston. Yeah. So that's a totally different way of life in the suburbs of St. Louis, where you have to drive to do literally everything. My parents don't have to. Down in the Central West End, they can walk to the grocery store and every restaurant they want to. Mm-hmm. And that's the same way I live in DC. I just, take the subway in every morning and never drive. My daughter lives here in the city too. She lives in DC proper, teaches 7th grade English. She doesn't have a car. She lives across from her street. That's a very different life than the car-centered world of suburbia.
Yeah. I live, as you know, I'm 1,000 yards from my house to my work and the kids' school. And I was shocked recently I took my car in for some service and I looked at my mileage and I was like, how did I put so much mileage on this car? And it's because I'm, it's not the commute to work. It's that I'm going, I'm going places. I'm going to the grocery store. I'm going to Target. I'm doing anything every single day. And, if I were a smarter person, I would find a way around it. But
I don't know if it's possible out there. I mean, I know you've got this light rail system, right?
Yeah.
I've taken it a couple times from the airport out to my folks, but even they're not used to it. Growing up in a car culture, they don't use it much. It doesn't really go out. Does it go as far as West County? I don't even know where it goes out there.
Yeah, I think so. It gets out to kind of Brentwood.
Okay.
Yeah. It really wasn't set up for true commuting, which was in my opinion, an oversight.
Well, it takes a kind of density too that I don't know if you have. I mean, my parents lived on an acre lot.
Yeah.
An acre lot here would be $10 million. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
My lot is like 1/14 of an acre in Bethesda, and it's still shockingly expensive. So there aren't suburbs, at least out where I live, like that, where you've got to be sprawling neighborhoods of homes on acre lots.
Yeah.
That just doesn't exist.
Speaking of growing up in St. Louis, moving to more urban environments, denser environments, just loving big cities. As I came back to St. Louis, I was really intrigued to kind of rediscover it, or frankly, discover much of it for the first time. And one thing that is really positive, for lack of a smarter word, that I really appreciated is we do have a thriving art scene and art culture. There's a bit of a music scene. And I'm interested to find out if you know, and maybe you're too far afield, but if you can talk much about writers and authors you see coming out of St. Louis.
Well, I would have to prepare for that, wouldn't I?
I'm sorry about that. We can move on.
Well, I can instantly think of the Pulitzer Prize winning poet, Carl Phillips, a beautiful poet I've admired for years. I talked to him out at Principia College, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, before he won the Pulitzer Prize. And I've interviewed him here in D.C. For the Library of Congress. So, that's a major poet. And there are some other major poets out there, too, that if I had better notes, I would rattle off their names.
Yeah, I mean, I said that you've written about your love for St. Louis, and I was thinking specifically in a review that you had written of 27th City. So obviously, Franzen and Janie Smiley. But those date back a few years. So I've been interested.
My gosh.
Yeah.
They haven't lived in St. Louis since the 70s, probably.
Probably. Is that how long ago?
Right?
Yeah. Is it?
I think it must have been. I think, where did Franzen go to high school? Did he go to John Burroughs?
I think that he did, but I don't know that for sure.
Jane Smiley did.
Jane Smiley did, yeah.
She did for sure, yeah. And of course, John Hamm and I were colleagues. I'm sure he's telling a similar story about me to his friends in Hollywood now. We were colleagues at John Burroughs. He worked there very briefly as a drama teacher.
Oh, I'd forgotten that. Yeah. And that was when, what's her name? Kemper was there, right?
Ellie Kemper was a student there.
And while you were there?
Bo Williman. Yes, I didn't have her in a class. Bo Williman, a very important Hollywood figure now. I think he's a writer. He was there too around the same time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a remarkable group. I understand they've helped raise a lot of money to build some fabulous theater out there at John Burroughs. But I haven't had a chance to see it. Yeah. I worked there for about 5 years.
So you grew up in St. Louis. Did you attend Principia College?
Yes. I did. And then I went to Washington University, got a degree there.
And then
after Principia College.
Did you go straight to John Burroughs?
No, I taught at Principia College for 7 years. And then once I moved back to St. Louis, the commute to Elsa every day really wore me down. I mean, it's beautiful. My wife loved it. She did it for a year. Then I did it for a few years. That it ends with riding along the river road. You can't even believe such beauty exists. Yeah. But every day it's a hard hour commute.
Of that.
So we eventually moved back to St. Louis. We moved to Brentwood. Mm-hmm. The kids were just starting school. And then I got a job at John Burroughs. Yeah, that was my favorite job. That's just a remarkable place.
Wow.
I mean, they don't need any advertising by me, but
yeah, they're doing fine.
They're doing fine. But it is just an ideal school. The teachers they hire good people. They give them the autonomy they need to do their job, and then they just get out of their way. Students just get a remarkably strong, interesting education there. I was very, very impressed. It was hard to leave.
And did you go straight from there to Boston, the Christian Science Monitor?
Yes. I had been writing book reviews for the Christian Science Monitor in Boston, and then my editor switched jobs, so I knew his job was open, so I applied for it, and I got it. And so at 35, I moved out of St. Louis for the first time.
Wow.
Not counting Elsa, because that's, in the orbit.
Yeah.
And we all moved to Boston. Yeah, and brought my mother-in-law too.
Wow.
So the five of us moved to Boston. We were there for 7 years, had a great run. It's a wonderful city.
Uh-huh.
But the winter is horrible.
Yeah. You'll take swamp summer over a Boston winter. Is that right?
Yeah. Because of the shoveling. I hated the shoveling so much. And I was, as I said, I stopped driving. So, I had to walk a mile to the metro, or what do they call it? The T, through snow. And it snowed it seemed to me it snowed 6 months out of the year. It was just miserable and so cold. One of my daughters uses a wheelchair, so everything had to be constantly shoveled so that we could get her out. It was funny because this summer, my wife and I just decided to do one of these mini vacations, where you're going to sort of enliven your life, which I highly recommend, by the way, because much cheaper, and it does sort of enliven your life. It's amazing how getting away just very briefly resets your clock.
Uh-huh.
So we went to Boston for 3 days and rented somebody's apartment downtown, and it was like May, and everything was blooming, and it was just the most gorgeous weekend in Boston ever. It felt like walking into a postcard. And I remember turning to my wife and said, "God, why did we ever move away from here?" And she's like, 6 months of winter is why we left.
Yeah.
So it's not always like that.
That's right. So you wrote some book reviews, and that kind of paved the way to a life as the book critic. And at this point, you've been the book critic at the Christian Science Monitor, Washington Post now, right? And so
Right.
How long are we talking that you've done this?
Almost 30 years now.
Almost 30 years.
Yeah. So long that I can't remember all the books I've reviewed.
That's a relief, because when I hear people talk about books and they remember every little thing, every little plot twist and tertiary character name, it really puts me to shame.
Nope. Yeah. Nope. I completely, as I said, completely note dependent. I read, I cover the books I read with lots and lots of notes.
Good.
And if it weren't for Goodreads, I'd have no idea what I'd read, or the web, where I can look back.
Sure.
Yeah, it's been remarkable. It was a student's mother. I was complaining about paper grading, which I didn't like to do. I was complaining about that. And she said, "Well, you should try book reviewing." And I had never even thought of that. I didn't even think of that as a profession. I mean, I read lots of book reviews, but they just sort of, appeared like mushrooms on the lawn one morning. I don't know where these things came from.
Uh-huh.
So I went to Library Limited.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that bookstore down in Clayton. The first big independent bookstore I'd ever seen. It's long gone now. And I walked in, and there was a new fiction shelf, and I picked up a book. It was about an English teacher. I thought, hey, I know something about that. And I read it and reviewed it and sent it off, and somebody bought it, and that was the beginning. And so for 30 years, I've been reviewing a book every week.
Wow. So as I was thinking about this conversation, and I was reflecting on 30 years of what I can only imagine 30 years of this work must have been like. There are just so many questions and so many things I would love to dive into, from where you've seen the publishing industry change and grow and move, to what it's like for you to have a specific angle or perspective on literature, but that literature is constricted by media, right? So a story can go in any direction, and many stories are books and movies and plays. And of course, they take different shapes when they're in a different medium. But I'm interested in how you approach it, how you feel about it, how you feel about books in general, being kind of tied to, or your work is focused on the printed word, which, of course, with changes in technology and media and society, different content gets sort of, I don't want to say relegated, but is considered right for a book as opposed to something else. What's that been like as you've seen that over 3 decades.
Tremendous consolidation, just unimaginable consolidation of the publishing industry, and then fragmentation at the bottom at the same time. So you've got all the publishers we used to have, the sort of name brand publishers, all grouping closer and closer together economically, corporately, into now 5, tried to be 4, but the Justice Department pushed back on that last one. So we've got 5 big publishers left. And then at the bottom, you've got hundreds of independent publishers, many of whom are doing important work, but it's really a winner-take-all system now. They're just barely hanging on. Many of them are nonprofits. They're driven by, a sort of love for a certain kind of art, dedication to the field, that sort of thing. Many of them are into poetry or short stories or works in translation, the kinds of things that are difficult to make a lot of money on for the big publishers. And so all these little publishers have picked up that. So that's one enormous economic change. And then, of course, from my point of view, there just aren't any book sections left. When I got into this business, most cities had newspapers, and most of those newspapers had a book page. That's all gone.
Good.
Most of those newspapers are gone, and certainly all of those book pages are gone. So now somebody was interviewing me for another story and said that he could only find 6 full-time professional book critics in America.
I was just going to ask if you're the last of a breed. Sounds like you are.
Oh, that means that many more people have walked on the moon than now review books for a living. It's just amazing to me. And there are only a handful of book sections left. On top of that, the Times, the Wall Street Journal, and us, and LA Times. That's a big switch. So you think, oh my gosh, all the book criticism is, now concentrated in these few big papers. But at the same time, once again, there's unimaginable fragmentation at the other end, which is Goodreads and Amazon and all these millions of people writing their own reviews and posting them on their blogs or on social media. Just tremendous democratization of book criticism that was not at all possible 30 years ago. So any discussions about concentration and the narrowness of opinions has to be balanced with this explosion of opinions that's been happening at the same time. And I'm not sure how to square that circle. It's a remarkable development. We now can hear from a lot more people, many more people, about what they think about books than we ever could have before. Obviously, they're not all platformed on big, like at the Times or the Wall Street Journal or here at the Post, but they can develop big audiences. I hear stories about young women on TikTok who have millions of followers talking about books they love. There is no professional book critic that has millions of followers. I mean, that is just beyond anything that any of us can attract. So it is still possible for people to break out of nowhere and develop these whole new communities around books they love. And that that's a wonderful thing. The whole gatekeeper system's been completely demolished. And we're seeing the rise of like romantasy, genres that didn't even exist 10 years, let alone 30 years ago. At least we didn't identify them that way. All different kinds of people are now writing books. And it's just the literature we have, despite the fact that fewer people are reading, which is we can talk about later, the literature we do have reflects a much broader spectrum of human experience. And that's really something to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get to the problem of people reading books. And that is not so optimistic. The audiences are shrinking year by year. Men in particular, we have a lot of trouble getting men to read fiction because they want to learn something. What would you possibly learn from a novel except, how to live or be a human being? Which is nowhere
Men are doing great at that.
They don't need novels. They need to learn more about how to trade Bitcoin. So I don't know what to do about that. And then the whole AI thing, which is coming after writers of all kinds, that's truly apocalyptically ominous. I talk to my wife, who's a high school English teacher, about this almost daily. I cannot believe that this is happening and that there's anything else we're talking about. Because the idea that machines are going to replace the way we think or keep us from learning to think or think critically there just is nothing more ominous on the future than that, I don't think.
Yeah, I sometimes get treated like a Chicken Little when I go out there and complain or freak out or raise an alarm just based on things that I've seen online. But it's hard to imagine us continuing to exist in any way that is recognizable. Unless
Yes.
it just turns out, some people say, oh, it'll be a big flop, or it's a bubble, or it's not sustainable. I guess it could collapse under its own weight at this point, but it's hard to see.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a collapse because the investment is ridiculous. It's all over leveraged, so that will all pan. But remember, the internet collapsed too. But here we are.
Yeah.
So the market collapse will not affect the technology and the way it develops. And if you've got something that can read for you and write for you, those are the ways we used to teach kids how to think. And those tools are now essentially gone.
Yes.
And so it's one thing for a professional person in business to use AI to write a memo for herself. That's fine. I don't see any problem with that. We didn't need more memos anyhow. But for someone who doesn't yet know how to read, to use AI to read a book for him, that means he'll never learn how to read.
Mm-hmm.
Or to use it to write a paper. He'll never learn how to write a paper, never learn how to express himself, never learn how to evaluate arguments and methods of persuasion. For democracy, this is an unmitigated disaster. Nothing will be left for us to do but shop and masturbate. That's the only thing AI and the internet will provide in the near future. You probably have to edit that part out.
Are you kidding? That's going to be the clip that gets us all the views. You mentioned being able to have a book read for you obviously removes the need for people to learn how to read. But something I wanted to ask about was, again, going back to this over 30 years, this tremendous shift in media and technology. And, your sliver of culture is in the printed word. And I'm interested in whether, obviously you're reviewing books that are available as ebooks and and audiobooks and other formats, but have you seen a shift in the content or in the quality of the work, or do you think about your work differently?
The volume is hard to wrap your mind around. We're getting about 150 books a day.
Wow.
Yeah. No prospective writer should ever see our mailroom. It's very depressing because we review about 2 a day.
Wow.
So we're picking 2 out of 150. That means that most of those books are not getting reviewed. And then, by the way, they're not getting reviewed anywhere else either, because we review as many books as any place except the Times and the Wall Street Journal and maybe the LA Times. So, the vast majority of books, 99.9% of the books, do not get reviewed after they get published. And it's so hard to write a book, and then it's so hard to get a book published. And then almost all those books are just snuffed out in their crib. Nobody reads them. Nobody hears about them. It's just heartbreaking. And that has exploded over those 30 years. You think about the number of readers slightly declining.
Mm-hmm.
That has taken place while the number of books available skyrockets.
Wow.
So we have this massive oversupply in relation to the size of the audience. And that, I don't know if that's a problem or not. It's just a situation that is sort of heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Ebooks, I don't have any problem with it. It seems to me that's a perfectly natural technology for people to use to have access to books at all times. I love the idea. Same with audiobooks, which has been the only fast-growing section of the publishing industry for the last 12 years, I think. Double-digit growth every year as more and more people discover this. We're both wearing our headsets. I listened to a book about Shakespeare on the way into work today. Millions of people discover ebooks for the first time every year. So that audience just has been growing exponentially, which is also, I think, wonderful for people to consume more information and literature in ways that work for them and for their lifestyle. Those are all good trends to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think of ebooks. I obviously think of ebooks as real books, but I also think of audiobooks as real books. I mean, you are listening, you're concentrating, you're evaluating what you're hearing, you're being moved by what's being described. That's fine with me. Mm-hmm. And also, a lot of people get older. It's harder for them to read. Being able to shift naturally to audiobooks is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And the industry has responded in the most effective way. I mean, the audiobooks that are available now are fantastic compared to what we had 30 years ago. Remember with all the tapes and everything you have in your car, you have like 60 cassette tapes. They'll be melting in the sun.
Yes.
Now the technology is so good. The production of audiobooks is so good. And the people they get to narrate, I mean, it is a big industry, and they get a lot of big stars there. I went to the award show a few years ago in New York for audiobook narrators. It was super fun. Huh. A lot of really talented people, kind of B and C rated actors, kind of people that had fallen off the mainstream. They all turned to audiobooks and were having great lives suddenly. They discovered a whole new career for themselves. Mm-hmm. It was really great to see.
But as a side note, right before the pandemic hit, right in the first couple months of 2020, I had a meeting with an editor at Audible, and we agreed that I would write up something, just a spec manuscript, because it was still in its early stages at that point, 5 years ago, but Audible was doing original content. And
yes.
And it was a very interesting conversation and a very interesting project because, she encouraged me essentially to write like a radio script, and I had been accustomed to writing something up in sort of normal prose, in this case, it was a nonfiction with a narrator, and I had to tweak it all and turn it into a script, and it was a very fun and interesting project.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah. But that really took the work in a different direction.
Yeah, it's a much bigger market out there for authors.
Yeah.
And the Audible book, I should say that Audible is a subsidiary of Amazon, whose founder, Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post.
Oh, yeah.
Audible does fantastic work with these, what you call them, they're exclusive productions.
Yeah, original content is what they were calling it, which is sort of a
original content,
Netflix-y term.
Yeah, I've been very impressed. They did a Pride and Prejudice production a few weeks ago that is fantastic. Oh. I've listened to mysteries they did. One was with John Lithgow. They have a lot of money. It's one of the extras they offer their subscribers, try and keep them in the field, and it's pretty effective.
Are you reviewing audiobooks? Or if you were to, would you approach that differently?
I do it probably 4 or 5 times a year when something hits me, when I like it. That's all. Yeah. The last one I did was this Pride and Prejudice one, which I thought was just incredibly romantic. I'm there on the subway weeping away. But there's a big Harry Potter thing coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll listen to that and review that too, probably. Uh-huh. So I only do it when when I want to. But we have a regular audiobook reviewer who does it every month.
So have the sort of the details of your job changed as the book and literature landscape has changed? Do you I imagine thinking about your job, you're probably looking at two different things. You're looking at story and you're looking at craft, right? I would kind of imagine maybe there are more elements to it that you consider, but has that changed just as culture has shifted or as book writing and publishing has shifted?
The biggest change for me was to stop editing, because I've always been primarily an editor who reviewed on the side, which was a crushing level of work. And I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I finally cried uncle, and so the Post let me stop editing. So that was just a life changer. Now I just write for the Post, don't do any editing, which is a different life entirely, because most of my job in the past was looking at that 150 books a day, selecting ones we should review, finding freelancers who might review it, getting them to review it, getting the review, editing the review, getting it in the paper, all the technology that involves, and of course the editing work and the labor of it. And now I don't have to do any of that at all. And I have to, I will tell only you and your listeners that I do not ever miss it.
I have a lot of listeners, so you gotta be careful.
So now, in the twilight of my career, I get to pick what I want to review, and I've got dedicated space on C2 every week. It's big space, so I can write as much as I want. I've got this newsletter that's been the most popular thing I've ever done in my life that goes out every Friday morning, where I can write about anything that is even remotely related to books or publishing. And so I just go wild every week and follow my own interests. I feel extremely fortunate.
I'll just say, I really enjoy your newsletter. And I've noticed that you either have or take a lot of, broad leeway when you're talking about things, and you share some personal opinions, and sometimes you share political opinions, which at this point, it's hard to even call some things opinions. Sometimes you're just stating certain facts that not everyone wants to hear. But I think a lot about that. You are an employee of the Washington Post, and of course they have journalists and they have opinion writers. But did you have to negotiate that, or was that just understood that you're not in the newsroom, so you can say whatever you want? How does that work?
Yeah, it is a very important distinction. When you stop being an editor, when you aren't a news writer, when you're officially a critic, an opinion writer for the Washington Post, that's your whole job, is to express and articulate interesting, engaging, and provocative opinions. So you're not doing something naughty. You're doing what you should do. And there's a pretty clear lines here at the paper between the reporters, the journalists. Of course, we're all journalists, but the reporters, people who write about what they see and tell us what's going on and analyze things, and those of us who are critics, who evaluate works of art, or music, books, theater, and politics too, and culture. So those, we're just different animals, and we have different parameters, and different things are expected from us. You still have to be fair. You have to write well. You've got to be interesting, because that's all. That's all what it comes down to, is whether people are willing to click on your material or not, or subscribe to you. But you can take on a different tone. And since I was always writing opinion, I was always writing reviews. It wasn't that big a shift for me. The biggest shift was writing about my family, which I started doing during the pandemic, when I got a sense of how desperately lonely people were. And I got such strong responses to just the little inklings, I would say, about what we were up to, that I now always do it. And I've gotten so many heartwarming and sometimes heart-wrenching letters about what people are going through out there. I think it's made me just more aware of the need that people have to hear stories of kindness and happiness, and humor. That everybody needs that. And especially when the world is during the pandemic, when people were sick and dying, or even now when people are so afraid and so disgusted. But those kind of stories have a real place. So I always sign off with some little story about what Dawn and the rest of us are up to here in DC. Or if we're traveling, and I'll throw on a little picture of us, which I would, never, ever had, for decades, I would never have thought to mention my family or my kids. But now I do every single week.
Does writing that newsletter scratch a writing itch for you? Do you have writing projects in the hopper? Do you have a desire to write and publish?
I write 4,000 words a week now, so that is one very long novel every year. 200,000 words. That is a lot.
Wow.
And as I remember that book room, the mail room I told you about, where I see all those books just come in and die.
Mm-hmm.
That has effectively snuffed out my desire to write a book.
Wow.
I think I could write an okay book, but the world is already packed with okay books. They don't need nobody needs another mediocre book by me. So I'm perfectly happy doing what I do, commenting on other people's books. And there are many wonderful writers out there to keep me busy.
I was thinking, piggybacking on your comment that there's 6 of you left in the world, or at least at the level that we're talking about.
That's full-time.
Sure.
Book critics living off. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about what an unassuming personality you are. And you found your way into this position where you're sort of an E.F. Hutton of the literary world. And for one thing,
are your listeners old enough to remember E.F. Hutton?
I was going to say, I'm not sure anyone would, but
my readers are old enough because my readers are old.
That must be strange for you. That must be strange to be able to just think something and say it and then turn around and find that it's become gospel truth, or that it's on the back of the novel in the airport.
Well, you wildly over exaggerate my influence, but it is very fun to have some voice in what's left of the literary community. But it's very, very minor. I mean, when you consider, and I'm not being falsely modest, I know this from the sort of data we collect, or that has been collected by publishers about where people hear about books. Book critics come down way at the bottom of the list. First comes like TV and radio shows and blogs and Twitter and social media and all that kind of stuff. Most people are not getting their book recommendations from newspaper book critics. So I don't have any illusions about my influence. It is, of course, flattering to see one's reviews quoted on the back of a paperback, but if you say nice things about people, they'll quote you. That's just the way it goes. It's not any kind of validation of my opinion or the quality of my work. That's just the nature of marketing. So I'm flattered, but I'm not confused about what's going on.
You've dabbled in a lot of what you're talking about. The bloggers and people putting their opinion out there online. You've done the video book reviews. You now have a newsletter.
Yes.
Which I loved. I believe you also have had a televised sort of slot. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm the book critic for CBS Sunday Morning, the news show. It's an online thing mostly, but once in a while they put me on air too. The video thing, gosh, it started a long time ago now, probably 14 years ago, when we all started to lose our jobs, book critics, and they were making us do all kinds of super ridiculous things to attract the young readers because they're so important. And so I was talking to my friends, other book critics who had, all been laid off now. And I said, gosh, wouldn't it be funny if they made us do like a video book review, and how, that would attract the young readers.
Yeah.
And so one day we just grabbed the video camera and ran around the house and threw together this book review. And I put it up on YouTube and sent links to my friends. And they, some of them thought it was funny. Somebody at the Post saw it, thought it was very funny. And so they asked for more. And so here, this whole thing of this satire that I devised of my employer suddenly became something they wanted more of. And we did it for years. These ridiculous, panicked, narcissistic book reviews, just all the worst qualities of book criticism and media.
Very self-consciously low production value.
Everything. And we had a good time. But it was, as you know from editing this podcast, just a time suck. I was spending about 6 hours per produced minute. Yeah, and I just couldn't lay that on top of my job. And when the pandemic hit, I didn't feel very funny. The news was so bleak. I mean, now it's, now that we all know it was fake and no one actually did die, it seems different. But at the time, it was very scary and it was very depressing, and it just wasn't possible to be silly for a while. And so I stopped doing it. Around the same time, I got this gig on CBS Sunday Morning every month, and that is pretty time consuming too. Although nothing like those other videos. We still film them in my house in the dining room, and Dawn is still the camera woman. It's not very silly. It's not silly at all, but it sort of satisfies that video part. But yeah, I have, despite my advanced age now, tried to stay up with where media is going. I've kind of given up on social media now, but I certainly was very into it for a long time because I do want to keep reaching people wherever they are. For publishers, the industry has shifted tremendously toward this field called romantasy, or just fantasy with romance. That is just a huge section. Romance was always big. I think it was always about a quarter of the entire publishing industry. But if you lay on romantasy and fantasy, I mean, these are essentially Harry Potter readers who grew up, but still want an element of that in their fiction. That has been a tremendous cultural shift in the publishing industry. And many, many writers have answered that with very, very popular, astronomically popular new series. Um, we always get other people to do that, or we write about it as news. So I cannot say anything critically that's interesting about it because I haven't really read it. But I do know that it's out there, and it is really reshaping the shape of the publishing industry.
Huh. Um, do you, that's just subjectively speaking, that's a genre that doesn't really appeal to me.
I know, it doesn't me either.
Well, so that's my question is I guess you're in a position now where you can pick and choose a book that you want to read and then critique.
But it does bother me though, because I want to have very broad taste. I want to review lots of different kinds of books, and I think I do that pretty well.
Uh-huh.
But it does bother me that I feel cut out of that
Mm-hmm.
world, both, I don't know, by taste and by age, frankly. It does trend much younger than I am now, and I don't want to be, that guy who comes barging in and telling people that they shouldn't read this stuff because it really irritates me. I try never to do that. I think people should read what they want to read, and I think every genre of literature has good books within it. Uh, and I would love to be able to find those books and comment on them, even in romance and in romantasy and fantasy. But they're huge genres. They build on one another, and I may be too late. It would take so much for me to get into it to be able to say anything interesting. So I just, part of sounding intelligent is knowing when to be quiet. And so I just don't,
Sure.
I just don't review those books because I don't think I know enough about it. That said, I mean, at one point I didn't know anything about contemporary poetry, and now I write about contemporary poetry all the time. It can be done, but it does take a long, long time. I got pushed into that by the Library of Congress, who asked me to host this interview series with poets. The first meeting, I was so frightened I couldn't even hear what they were saying. There was just like a rush in my ears. I was so intimidated, and then of course I agreed to do it, and it was for many years. It was a panic because they set up these interviews with these very famous poets. I'd never even heard of them before, and I would check out all their books, and I would read every poem they had ever published. And so I would go in there to interview them. This is in front of an audience and on the video, and over the years I did become confident about it. I felt like, yes, I can understand contemporary poetry. I can comment on it. I can understand where people are in the field. I can see who relates to who. But that takes a lot of time. And fantasy and romantasy, those are even bigger fields. Those are massive, and they have enormous audiences who track these characters and ideas across books and across genres. And so if you want to be an intelligent critic of that genre, you have got to do your homework. You've got to know what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
And that I've not done that yet.
And as I think about it, in both cases, although let's say in very different ways, it's very hard to tell the difference between the good one and the bad one, right? A
But that's the
poor
case.
version.
But that's the case of anything you don't know anything about. I mean, for instance, if you didn't know how to play chess at all, and someone just put the pieces on the board randomly, it would look the same to you as a real game, right?
I guess that's
So
true.
it's the same with literature. If you don't know the field at all, you can't make any critical judgments about it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if, I mean, I did, when I was editing, I did start a romance column. I found a romance writer that I really liked, Sarah McLean, very famous, very successful. And she wrote a column for us every month. And she was really good and she was funny and she knew everything and she knew everyone. It didn't attract the kind of audience I was hoping for. We just weren't able to reach those readers where they are or offer them what they wanted. I don't know if they have their own blogs or their own magazines that they trust more than us, or maybe we didn't stick with it longer. I don't know what it was, but anyhow, I was not able to do it. And somebody, I think the Times has a romance column now, but I don't know how successful that is either. These large but self-contained interest groups are hard for general places to break into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a continuing challenge.
It seems like that's sort of probably an issue of self-selection as well. As I think about the different niches of genres, um, I think in a lot of cases, I think romantasy is a good example of this. It's people who have identified themselves as not of the mainstream, right? Or as looking for something unique and different and, you know,
I think you're
maybe
probably right.
underground.
Right. I think you probably are right. But I don't know because young women read a lot. They are really keeping the industry going and they have very broad tastes. You'll see them reading, you know, a romantasy novel with the embossed cover, and the unicorn swooping over some man with his shirt off, which you think, oh, you turn up your nose at because you have no respect for that. But you don't know how good that book is. And at the same
Yeah.
time, in their bag, they've also got two Booker Prize winning novels. So I think you would discount these people's tastes at your own peril, because they do have very wide tastes. They are very intelligent and discriminating, and they read across genres much more, well, much more than men do, for instance, in general, but much more than most readers do, I think.
Uh-huh.
And they belong to lots of book clubs, and that also pushes them out of their comfort zones. It gets them to read other things. Uh, it was Ian McEwan who once said, "If women stop reading, the novel will die,"
Hmm.
and that has never been more true.
Huh. Yeah. Um, okay. The very podcasty interviewee question. Um, who are you reading? Who should we be reading? Who will we be reading next?
It's good. It's good.
Thanks. I just came up with it.
Yeah. I'm reaching for things. You should be reading The Wayfinder by Adam Johnson, Pulitzer
I'll
Prize winner.
speed right through that. That looks easy.
Oh, it's huge, but it is so good, so good. It's set about 1,000 years ago in Polynesia, and it's this, it's legends, it's fantasy, it's adventure, it's war, it's family drama. I was completely blown away. It is a spectacular book. Uh, I think this is up for a National Book Award in a few weeks. We'll find out if she wins. I guess obviously on your podcast, people can't see this. That's A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. Uh, she writes about, this is only her second book, young woman. First book also did very well. I'm sure this book will do well too. Came out Tuesday, I think. Very exciting story about a woman who's trying to move her family from India, but like 7 days before she moves them, some thief steals their passports and they're
Hmm.
trapped in this city that's basically running out of food. Tremendously exciting. For Halloween, I don't know if this will go up before or after Halloween, but a lot of people see for the Frankenstein movie, which goes on Netflix in November, and I think is already on streaming somewhere. Love, Sex, and Frankenstein by Caroline Lee. I mean, I knew the story about how Mary Shelley had written Frankenstein, but I had never experienced it like this. This story is so wild. There she is. She's having an affair with Percy Shelley. she's staying in this place with Lord Byron. Uh, the summer's been dark because of a volcano that exploded, thousands of miles away. This is all true, by the way. And
Huh.
Byron says, "We're trapped in this house on Lake Geneva. Why don't we all write ghost stories?" And so they all go back to their rooms, and young Mary Shelley, she's like 18 years old, sits down and writes Frankenstein.
Wow.
Yeah, not the whole thing, of course, but she
Yeah,
starts there. So this is the story of how that began, and it is really, really exciting. So there you go. There's 3 books.
that was great. You should do this for a living. I gotta say, I really do. We were talking about your video book reviews, and we were talking about, I described you as unassuming. I really appreciate just then, like the minute you turned around and started reaching for books, you came back and you were so enthusiastic and so excited. And I feel like the work that you've done and the way that you go about doing it really takes, you were talking about this sort of stratification of the book criticism world, literary criticism world. And I feel like it takes it down out of this kind of ivory tower sense and makes it very accessible and very exciting. And I appreciate that.
I appreciate that, Eric, because that is the most important thing for me. I see too many critics who are just allergic to being enthusiastic. And I don't understand that. I mean, here we are in a culture that doesn't want to read. It's so hard to get someone to pick up a book. You have got to sweat a little. You've got to convince people. You've got to convey to them how much this book meant to you and how much you enjoyed it. It doesn't mean you like everything and you become, sort of passy for the industry. But when you find books you like, you should trumpet them.
Hmm.
I think it all comes from teaching. I think you were one of my students, right?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so there I was, every day I had to try and interest a bunch of teenagers who really were not that excited about what I had to say. And so you've got to work for it. It is like a performance. You've got to convince these young people who have so many better things to do with their time that they should read early American literature. That was what I was teaching in my case. And so that sense of trying to just convince people that a book is worth their time and give them a sense of what they'll get out of it, that is still my primary interest. I've never forgotten what it's like to stand in front of a group of young people and not just teach, but try to enliven them to the life of literature and how it can broaden their world. And so I'm still basically doing that without a classroom. We're trying to.
I see why you made a beeline to the winters of Boston.
I did love teaching. If I didn't have to grade papers, I'd go back in a heartbeat.
Ooh, you're reading something anyway. So, you wake up each morning to a list, or at least maybe just a figurative list of 150 books. Um, how does one choose? Especially
It's
when you probably have your favorites and you've got your favorite authors, and your favorite author has a new book, and you probably, for entertainment purposes, want to kind of revisit that. But I imagine you also want to discover something new. What's the what's the method or the trick?
You pretty much hit on it. Although I got to say, it's a lot easier now. When I was editing, I had to look at all 150 books, but now I've got these very fine editors helping me look through the list and telling me about books I should review. So that's just a tremendous help. And since I'm a regular critic, I know I'm going to review all the big authors, award winners. That just takes a lot of my 52 slots out right there,
Sure.
unless I get to know them, which is a weird and interesting problem because like the fifth time you've interviewed Alice McDermott, you've fallen in love with her so deeply you could not possibly review her books objectively anymore. And so now, dear Alice McDermott is off my list. I can't review her anymore. And if you interview enough people enough times, that starts to happen with a lot of authors. So there are famous authors who fall off my list and I can't do anymore. But there are a lot of authors out there, and so they're all, so take all those books, all the famous people. all the big headline books, all the award winners. And then I want to fill in those extra slots, like you say, new people. And then you just rely on what you're hearing from a few publicists that you trust. And there are a few publicists I trust. Some advanced reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, will lead us to think, maybe this is one worth checking out. So you're always trying to give a little attention every year. Not a little attention. You're trying to give some significant attention every year to debut authors.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Is that democratization that you mentioned of the web, is that having an effect one way or another on the quality of the work, quality of the books?
Yeah. That is really hard to say because of the numbers. And I'm reading such a teeny fraction. I mean, no statistician would think that my sampling is relevant because it's just too small. And you've got the influence of the writing schools too. It's not just Iowa anymore. There are other fine writing schools around the country, and they produce. I know they take a lot of criticism from, I don't know, snobs, but they produce a lot. They produce a lot of very fine young writers, and that I think has had an important effect on literary fiction too.
Uh-huh.
You get a lot more finely trained novelists coming out of these graduate programs now. I don't think they write a particular kind of book. I've heard that, but I don't think that's true. I see a
Hmm.
lot of variety coming out of that.
Hmm.
And I also want to make sure that I'm, as I said before, reviewing different kinds of books from different kinds of people. Think how different it was, 40 or 50 years ago, where you could read all year and just read books by white guys named John. That that was just ridiculous. The publishing industry is vastly more reflective now of humanity, and we hear from a lot of different kinds of experiences, and I want to make sure that I'm reflecting those too, that kind of variety.
Hmm. I guess the other piece of the democratization question is the fact that everyone seems to be a creator of content these days, and some people
Oh.
still do so in the written word and just blurt it out on the web and build, as you mentioned earlier, build an audience. We romantically like to imagine that there's a needle in the haystack out there, but do you have thoughts about that?
It does happen. Every year it happens. Every year I read somebody for the first time that I haven't heard of, frankly, that nobody's heard of, and they just come out of nowhere and they write a tremendous book, and it's the start of a brilliant career, and it's just very, very exciting. The other side of that, though, the dark side, is that everyone is writing a book and everyone can easily write a book.
Uh-huh.
And I literally don't go anywhere where someone doesn't eventually tell me. I can usually hear it coming like a cough. Oh, I'm working on a book. Would you like to read it? And I'm like, every fiber of my being is like, no, no, I don't want to read it. How would I possibly fit that in? Uh, I'm so swamped. I'm so behind all the time. Uh, but
You might as well
somewhere out
tell
there,
people you're a Hollywood producer, and then at least they would just be handing you screenplays.
it is like that. Like, and it's like when I go to a book festival, I never come home when someone hasn't surreptitiously dropped a book into my bag to read. Like I'm going to go home and spend 4 or 5 hours, a whole workday, just reading this book that mysteriously appeared in my book bag. Or
Yeah.
I'm coming back from Europe with my wife and daughter. I think we were in, I don't know, this is part of the story. I couldn't remember where we were from because I was so tired because we'd stopped several places getting home. And I got separated from them and I didn't have any luggage. And so I was instantly tagged as a terrorist because here I was, this bewildered man without luggage. And so I got separated from them and put off to the side, and I was being grilled by this what do they call those TSA guys, about
Huh?
where would I come from? I couldn't remember. Was it Zurich? I don't know. Was it Budapest? It just sounded all very fishy, and it was getting incredibly aggressive, this interview. And then all he said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a book critic for the Post." Oh, he says, "I've written a book." Yep, there it was. I said, "Well, I'd love to read it." The whole interview changed. I was swept through TSA. It was all over. Everything was fine, all forgiven. You know, so it does come in handy sometimes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you've got a pass, golden key. That's great. Well, that makes me feel really good about the fact that I'm dying for your input on something that I've written. which I will not be sending to you.
Yeah. Whew. it's it's wild. Uh, it's more a problem for Dawn. She teaches 11th grade, and that's where the AI is so corrosive. My younger daughter teaches 7th grade. That's a little too young. They're not using it yet, or they're too naive, or I don't know what's going on. But she says she's still not seeing it, not having a big effect. The bigger effect there is things like ICE intimidating the students. She had a trip planned to the Shakespeare Theater here in town, but she decided it was just too spooky to take the kids from school to the subway past these military agents spread along the street because many of them are Hispanic, and it was just too traumatizing for them. So it's just incredibly horrible what the effect of this policy is having on the city. Yeah, it is. It is. But no, it's great to talk to you. Wonderful to talk to you. Really, really enjoyed this, and I appreciate so much your willingness to have me on the podcast. Okay. Yeah. Have a good have a good weekend and happy Halloween. Okay. Yeah. See my bats? No, it's no. You would think, wouldn't you? But no, it's my office. It's lovely. Overlooks. I'm up on the 8th floor. It looks over a beautiful park. Yeah, this is the life now. Yeah, this is what happens if you hang on long enough. Yeah, you do understand my situation. Okay. All right. Great to talk to you, Eric. So long.